Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Google Ads Accessibility webinar. We're really excited to have you join us. As you may know, it's reported that at least 1 in 5 people live with a disability. Now it is more important than ever to factor accessibility into your company's online experiences. From a marketing perspective, inaccessible site experiences substantially limit those with disabilities from completing their desired action on your site. Today, we'll hear from experts across Google on a range of accessibility topics, including why you should care about inclusive design and accessibility, how you can build a culture that supports your accessibility efforts, the most effective ways to get started, and tactical next steps that will help you execute your next project or campaign. Our first speaker, Tina Ornduff, coordinates educational outreach efforts as a program manager for the engineering education team at Google. She manages accessibility work across various projects in the research organization and works on several computer science online learning initiatives. She's also contributed to many of Google's online courses. Previously, she led Google Geo EDU Group, where she was an advocate for geographic literacy through the use of technology like Google Maps and Google Earth. Prior to Google, Tina was a principal technical writer specializing in administrator and developer documentation for companies like Netscape, Tandem, Motorola, and Good Technology. Thanks for joining us today, Tina. Let's get started.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to sharing some information. Yeah, I am a program manager at Google. I've been at Google for almost 14 years, so I've been lucky enough to participate most recently in our accessibility efforts across the research organization specifically. So. Let's get started about why companies should care about accessibility. So to define accessibility, accessibility really, what it means is to ensure that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with products, services, and tools. And this ensures that they can contribute equally without barriers. So why is this important? Well, because globally there are over 1 billion people who have a disability and over 6 billion people who are temporarily able-bodied, meaning someday they will have a disability. If products are inaccessible, intentionally or even unintentionally, billions of people are put into potentially stressful and harmful situations. For example, if you have something fundamental as a simple form, maybe it's asking for credit card information or a password, and it's not accessible to people unable to see the screen, for example, or if there's an error message where that's less than useful, these users are put into a situation where they might have to ask someone, potentially even a stranger, depending on the situation, to submit it for them, and that is really simply unacceptable. So, equally important, if products are inaccessible, billions of people may also be excluded from many aspects of life and society, such as employment and community engagement, because they're unable to use the products necessary for their job and for communication. And equally as important, if products are inaccessible, billions of people may also be excluded from many aspects of life and society, such as employment and community engagement, because they are unable to use the products necessary for their jobs and communication, as I mentioned before. So here's a couple of examples. So, often in big cities, they're just having buildings be accessible, so you can actually get into the building without stairs, or there's a simple trail crossing, right? So not accessible for a lot of people. And here's some stairs in Paris. A lot of older cities as well do not have the accessibility infrastructure, so it limits the opportunities to get around the city, needless to say. So, where does Google fit in, and where can other companies fit in? And our mission statement is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And we really, when we say accessible, we really want accessibility to be built into all of our products. So we made a commitment, a public commitment to make accessibility a core consideration from the earliest stages of product design through release. And given how much our products work to improve people's daily productivity, communication, and access to information, we take this very seriously, and that we really are committed to work to fulfill this, because it's about shifting our culture and the way we approach our everyday work to be considerate and to consider, I should say, accessibility across all things that we do every day. So beyond being googly, which is what we say at our company, is that making our products more accessible is beneficial in many ways, including it improves the business and brand, it drives innovation, and it creates better products for everyone. So let's talk a little bit more about these things. So when it comes to buying products, not only Google products, who has spending power? People with disabilities have 175 billion in discretionary spending in the US alone. And 4 million Americans turn 50 each year, and people who are over 50 spend nearly 400 billion in 2003. So that's kind of an older data point, but the point is that there's a lot of spending power for people with disabilities that are permanent and temporal. So we'll look a little closer to some of the data. These are a couple of quotes from the World Health Organization. And globally, everyone, if they live long enough, will experience at least one eye condition in their lifetime, whether that's all of a sudden you can't see the small type very easily, or you start using some slight magnification in your glasses. Just know that at some time we will all experience some kind of sight condition. So here you can see some additional information. 81% of people with visual impairment are aged 51 and over. One of the leading causes of visual impairment for this age group is macular degeneration. And statistics from the World Health Organization's World Vision Report estimated that in 2020, 195.6 million people have a form of age-related macular degeneration, and that by 2030 there will be 243.4 million people with that condition. So in the year 2030, how many people will you know that fall into that group? And does it include you? Also, for statistics on deafness and hearing loss, in 2020, there's an estimated 486 million people with a disability hearing loss, and it's estimated that there will be over 900 million people by 2050. Current estimates suggest that an 83% gap in hearing aid need and use. For example, only 17% of those who could benefit from the use of a hearing aid actually use one. So there's quite a few folks who can't hear everything that's happening around them. So now we know that there are a lot of people with accessibility needs, and those individuals have spending power. And so when you think about it, who who else might be buying your product or Google products. Large institutions evaluate accessibility when making product purchasing decisions. And why is that? Well, in the US, federally funded institutions are required to comply with civil rights legislations of the Americans with Disability Act and Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. What federally funded agencies or programs might evaluate products based on accessibility so they are not discriminating against people? How about government agencies, federally funded projects, K through 12 schools, and post-secondary entities like state colleges, universities, and vocational training schools? When we don't find, or when we don't design, for accessibility, we lose out on many business opportunities. So, federal agency contracting officials and government buyers must comply with U.S. civil rights legislation, which includes using accessible products. So, when doing market research and evaluating proposals, they use a standardized assessment. So just so you know, if you have a product that you think would be great for education for that matter, or for government institutions, if your company has not considered accessibility in your products, or your products are not accessible, they cannot even approach you to do business. So think about that. If your work and your products are not accessible, you're missing out on a big part of the market. So as I mentioned, accessibility is necessary to the business and the brand. For us, googliness is important. It's the right thing to do. Compliance, there are legal requirements, and financially, there's impact on both revenue and cost. And there's a lot of lost opportunity if we don't make accessible products. The second benefit of accessibility is that disability is the engine of innovation. There's a quote says, you could describe this in that old cliche that necessity breeds invention. But a more accurate interpretation is that in empathizing with others, we create things that we might never have created ourselves. We see past the specifics of what we know to experiences that might actually be universal. So solving accessibility challenges drives innovation. In 1808, Pellegrino Turri built the first working typewriter to help his blind friend write legibly. In 1971, closed captioning was first demonstrated at the first national conference on television for the hearing impaired in Nashville, Tennessee. And in 1972, our own Vint Cerf programmed the first email protocols for the nascent internet to communicate with his wife, who was deaf, while he was at work. And then in 2009, Google released YouTube software that automatically adds captions to all videos using a speech recognition model and auto-translating into 50+ languages. In 2016, we released Google Assistant, which enabled two-way conversations with mobile and smart devices, providing sight and hands-free interactivity. And then in 2018, we released Smart Reply using a person's conversation history. The software generates reply suggestions, which reduces response times and keyboard input. So doing the right thing impacts millions of people's people's lives, and we also need to comply with the law, and there's a business case for all companies to develop accessibility compliant products for access to federal, state, and therefore educational markets. So I wanted to also describe some various accessibility personas. So there are people with vision, and we focus on 4 accessibility personas. So those are people with vision, being blind or having low vision, hearing, deaf or hard of hearing, mobility, hand tremors or those who use wheelchairs, and cognitive disabilities such as dyslexia to autism or Down syndrome. By no means is this list exhaustive, but it's a good start. And it's important to grow your understanding of the nuances of assistive needs that your users will have, because many users have multiple disabilities and we will all experience some form of impairment in our lives. So as mentioned earlier, disabilities can be permanent, temporary, or situational. So to illustrate this concept, many of you might have a different relationship with limited vision, whether that's permanent, temporal, or situational. If you're not blind, you may have experienced temporary vision loss, like when you have a migraine headache. And we've all had a situational impairment when you transition trying to read a tablet screen or your phone in direct sunlight. And all of these situations, and all of us, depending on the situation, we might need to work with technology at some point with limited sight. So here's another one you might have experienced, like after a temporal situation might be after heavy exercise, and you get lightheaded, and yet again, here's another example of temporal, doing a heavy workout, or even just being overly tired, or having some other kind of situation where maybe you've overdone it a little bit. Deafness and hearing loss is the next example that we're going to look at. And so you have a girl here using sign language, and then there's somebody with headphones on, like myself, and then there's somebody kind of you see the picture there of the couple in a loud bar. So the first one is an example of a permanent situation. Temporal would be the next one, with something that is just a temporary way of working. For example, with headphones on, might have noise cancellation, so you can concentrate a little bit better. And then the other one is situational. So as soon as you go outside or to a more quiet room, you'll be able to hear much better. So want to emphasize that disabilities don't stay in neat categories, and there's a lot of diversity within a single category. As it says here on the slide, for example, low vision can mean many things. The way a person with glaucoma sees an interface is different from a way a person with cataract sees an interface. And on the other hand, someone with mild autism spectrum disorder might have more in common with someone with mild dementia than someone with severe autism. And it's also very common to meet users with overlapping impairments. For example, a person with Parkinson's can have both limited mobility and vision impairment. So you can see here that if you're looking at some of the numbers, in the United States, 1 in 4 adults has some type of disability. 13.7 have a mobility disability, 10.8 have cognitive disability, 5.9 have a hearing disability, and 4.6 have a vision disability. So you can see that, so as the population ages, these numbers can increase as well. And adults living with disabilities are much more likely to be obese, smoke, have heart disease, or diabetes. And so that's also something to consider. Visual disabilities, it's not only people who are blind or have little to no vision. If you have low vision, you can't be corrected by prescriptive contact lenses or glasses, and it could be due to blurriness, flashers, floaters, light sensitivity, tunnel vision, or poor distance vision, and color blindness, being unable to see the full color spectrum is another common visual disability. Hearing disabilities, deaf, so you have very little to no functioning hearing, hard of hearing, mild to severe, difficulty with functional hearing. So for somebody who is hard of hearing, this means that they might have mild to severe difficulty, and they usually communicate with spoken language, but could benefit from hearing aids, cochlear implants, and assistive technologies. For motor disabilities, someone with a motor disability could have upper body or lower body movement limitations. They might be unable to move all or part of their body, have limited finger dexterity, or have speech difficulties, which may take the form of slurring, lisping, stuttering, for example. And then there's no one official definition that encompasses enough regarding cognitive disabilities. At Google, we require people to use different cognitive functions, such as short or long-term memory recall, attention, planning, to engage with our products. And this requirement is a problem for 630 plus million people worldwide who have a form of cognitive impairment. So I want to play a video. I'll just play part of it now, and then there'll be a link in the resources so you can watch the complete video. But this is talks a little bit about a day with Jeff, who has essential tremor.
It's just part of who Jeff is. It's just interesting to see, what this phenomenon is that's affecting his body and how he copes with it and how we all cope with it. It's definitely been getting worse in the last few years. So it's become a bigger and bigger part of our lives. So, hon, I'm going to hang back and watch you make breakfast.
That sounds good. Okay.
Jeff loves to cook, and he's a very good cook. He likes to do things himself. But, sometimes he can't open things or he can't cut things. I don't want him cutting his fingers. Most of the time, he will try to do something, and it's always an experiment. It's like your whole life, you're experimenting constantly to see what you can do and what you can't do. So mainly, I just do what Jeff asks me to do.
I'm 61 years old right now, and at some point in either my very late teens or early 20s, when I was doing a lot of backpacking and rock climbing, I discovered what at that time I thought was my just losing the stomach for rock climbing. I was getting a little shaky when I was on a climb. At that time, I just assumed maybe I wasn't cut out for rock climbing after all. I discovered many years later that I had a neurological condition called essential tremor that I did inherit. My mother had essential tremor. My father did not. It's an intention tremor, totally influenced by emotion. You don't see it, but as soon as I go to do something, especially a fine motor skill something, boom, it hits. Too much of a challenge. Common things like writing and feeding yourself really bring it on much more.
I'm going to fast forward a little bit in the video now, just to where Jeff talks a little bit more about about technology.
Technology would be if somebody could invent a fingerless glove, so I would still have access to my fingertips, but that would go up my arm, past the elbow, that would provide resistance so that my tremor can't control my movement so totally. Interestingly enough, the best medication for people with essential tremor is alcohol, which obviously is not a kind of medication you want to take as medication. When it wears off, it doesn't just wear off. My tremor is worse.
Eventually, there may be a pill or something so that one doesn't actually have to drink alcohol and have all of.
So just you get a little glimpse into one type of motor impairment that many people might be experiencing. Also something that gets worse with time. So somebody like that may not need assistive technology when they are first diagnosed, but eventually will need quite a bit of assistance from other people, and it would be great if there were opportunities for where they can interact with our technology or with your company's technology in a way that helps them be a little bit more independent. So just to summarize, 4 main disabilities that we focus on at Google, which is vision, hearing, mobility, and cognitive disabilities, but also being aware that these disabilities can be permanent, temporary, or situational, and also that there are many aspects of these disabilities. So considering all of them is a good way to make sure that you're reaching populations throughout the world that could then engage with your product and your technology. So a couple of just fundamentals of assistive technology that some people with disabilities are using to access all kinds of things on the web. So what is assistive technology? It's any tool or system that improves or maintains the functional capabilities of persons with disabilities, and that includes high-tech solutions, special digital devices such as a braille terminal for people who are blind, hardware like prosthetic limbs, wheelchairs, or voice assistants, and there's also many low-tech solutions, paper flashcards, and magnifying glasses. So here you can see there's just different picture with a woman with a magnifying glass. And then in the realm of digital products, this includes special keyboards, screen readers, switch devices, magnifications, captioning, eye gaze and head trackers, voice recognition, headphones, smartphones, computer screens. And typically hardware and software work together to, as is the case with a computer screen. So this is a simple example of magnification. Many people will use Zoom features to help them read text on the screen. I use magnification on my phone just so I can read in various light settings, and also when I don't have my glasses available, this helps me read the text. Switch devices is another type of assistive technology, and people with severe mobility disabilities use these devices. Stephen Hawking, for example, was diagnosed in 1963 with ALS, which is a motor neuron disease, and he used these switch devices to communicate. In this particular image, there are two large buttons. One is white and the other is orange, and are used to traverse forward and backwards through the content of a screen. Braille devices assist people who are blind, and the white buttons are for inputting characters, and the black row of rounded pins which raise and lower for the person to read with their fingertips. And then screen readers assist users by verbalizing on a screen based on the developer accessibility implementation. So these are kind of common assistive technologies. So here you can see kind of different user environments. And people are people, and everybody loves to get online. User data collected in a WebAIM screen reader survey shows you can see the different types of operating systems that people with screen readers are using, and the browsers that people are using as well. And then these are the kind of the most common screen readers and the most popular ones. And I just want to, there's a variety. And what's important here to note is that if you are testing accessibility for your interface, it's important not only to test with these different screen readers, but also within different operating systems. And these numbers are changing quickly over time. And I think the other thing that's important to note is that many users have different types of technology, so they might have more than one computer, for example, or they might have a smartphone and a laptop, or they might have one environment at work and one environment at home. So essentially, it's really important when you are testing for accessibility to consider all the different types of combinations. Lastly, I just want to kind of summarize that all companies have the power and responsibility to remove barriers and empower all users to be productive and connected. And if a company does not consider accessibility, not only are they losing out on users, and but they also are unable to, as I mentioned, for legal reasons, to do business with government entities that are required to ensure that this is the case, that accessibility has been considered in the products that they choose to purchase for large institutions and any government funded institution. So, but at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do, and we really need to be mindful of that. And then I hope that this presentation has given you a little insight into the different type of disabilities and how you might be able to help users throughout the world use your products by thinking about accessibility from the beginning. And with that, I will say farewell.